Hey there, I'm Steve, and welcome to Jamson Entertainment. And welcome to the conversation. Just before we get started, there are many ways you can help. You can like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. But most importantly, please share this video. Get the word out there so we can talk about all the things that we love. I recently just saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, starring Shameik Moore. And right now I'll just do a blanket, sorry for mispronouncing your name, Haley Steinfeld, Brian Tyree Henry, Luna Lauren Velez, Jake Johnson, Oscar Isaac, Jason Schwartzman, Issa Rae, Daniel Kaluuya, Karan Soni, Shea Wigman, Greta Lee, Mahershala Ali, Gerard Jerome, J.K. Simmons, and Donald Glover. So this is the sequel to the hit movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This time the trailers are subversive, but in a good way, because you think it's going to be 100% Miles' story, and it's not. It's a healthy mix of his story and Gwen's story, starting with Gwen's story. So they very briefly touched on her backstory in the first movie, how she had to watch her best friend die, and they go into detail how that happened. She has an arc with her father in her universe, and Miles has an arc. In the first movie, it was really just with his dad. This movie, he has an arc with both of his parents, and you can see him still becoming the man he was made to be. They even say how old he is in this one. He's 15 years old, sophomore in high school. He's still figuring this Spider-Man thing out, on top of regular life. But that's quintessential Spider-Man, isn't it? You're trying to figure out how to be a superhero, but you're also doing your best to balance regular life, and it just becomes an existential crisis. This movie, with the exception of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, arguably, because it's hinted at, brings in all the Spider-Men and women. And sometimes throughout the movie, they'll have text come up explaining something, or they'll just tell you where the reference for this Spider-Man or Spider-Woman comes from. I watched this with my friends, and I brought this up to them. I'm like, it's cool that they did that. At the same time, though, I wish they didn't, because if they really wanted to lean into pointing out the references in this movie, the scenes when they're in the Spider-Verse would be nothing but the references for every spider person in there. So I almost would have preferred if they didn't have the references in there and they just left the super fans of Spider-Man be like, oh man, that's really cool. This from this comic book is in there. Without the little text that popped up, it wasn't that often. It maybe happened 10 times throughout the movie, and it's a 2.5-hour movie, so that's not a whole lot. I still think it would have been nice if they left them out, because the world is filled with Spider-Man fans, and some of them make content that find the Easter eggs in the movies. And this one probably has an endless list of Easter eggs. I can only imagine. There's got to be a few thousand Easter eggs in here. If you freeze every frame in this movie and you go through it with a fine-tooth comb, countless Easter eggs. It probably has the most Easter eggs in any movie ever made so far. And speaking about freezing every frame, this movie does it again. In the first movie, you could freeze any frame in the movie, and it is a picture that you could screenshot, frame, and put it on your wall. This movie is absolutely gorgeous, and the reason why is because they add in the extra shots to do so. Unlike some other animation that for whatever reason they don't, they just do the regular 24 frames per second. They maybe do 30 frames per second just to get a little more fluidity through there. This one added in, I'm not sure how many frames, but it's the extra frames that make this movie look fantastic. You don't miss a single thing in here, because at lower frame rates you'll see some blur lines, or the image will be stretched out because it's not a full frame there, because it's filling in the gaps. But with this one, the gaps are filled in. It's just great storytelling for animation. I wish more animation did this. Both times this movie has taken animation to the next level, and part of the references is the live action stuff. I'm not going to tell you the parts where they kind of touched on the Tom Holland stuff, because it would be kind of spoilers. Not spoilers for the story, but spoilers for the Easter eggs, and you really have to go out and watch this movie for yourself. It's definitely worth it. The one problem I have with this movie, it's about a half hour too long. I'm relatively certain that both movies are 2.5 hours long each, somewhere in there. You don't feel the runtime in the first movie, and I've seen it multiple times. This one, I feel the runtime. runtime. Okay, maybe not a half hour, but 15 minutes could be cut. There is a chase scene in the Spider-Verse, and to just bring some context and go over the plot briefly. When it gets to Miles and he gets into the Spider-Verse, Miguel, who is the leader of this task force that goes through the other universes to clean up messes, is infuriated with Miles. Because Miles got bit by that spider in the first one, it set off this series of events where the multiverse is starting to unravel. And in addition to Miles being bitten by that spider, we run into the villain for this movie. It's kind of a lame name, but the villain starts out really lame. His name is Spot. Was a henchman or a scientist that worked for Kingpin in the first movie. The first movie, there was a collider, and the collider is the reason why the Spider-Verse gets opened up. This guy was working on something similar, and like all villains in comic books, the experiment goes wrong, and he becomes what he is now. It looks like a guy wearing a white spandex suit, and he has holes all over him. Those are portals that I think he can take off of himself and put onto objects, and then reach in and grab or go through them, and it gets really complicated with them, and it makes for really interesting fight scenes. And now I'm realizing how off course I've gotten from my point, but I'm getting back to it. At some point, Spot is able to jump through the multiverse because of his portals. The first movie and the collider in that one, the spider that bites Morales is from another universe, and that universe doesn't have a Spider-Man, and that's part of why Miguel is so frustrated at Miles. But when you think about it, it's not Miles' fault he got bit by the spider. He had no control over that. Miguel doesn't see it that way. And so the chase scene I'm talking about, I think really goes on for too long, so that's where you could trim some fat. Don't get me wrong, the chase scene is phenomenal. It's very creative, beautiful artwork. It still drags the movie down. It would have been cool if it was an extended scene on 4K. I'm definitely down for that. I've seen in some other movies, which ones they are escape me at the moment, but in their deleted scenes, sometimes there are also extended scenes. Actually, now that I think of it, it was Spider-Man No Way Home. So I saw the extended cut of that movie in theaters. It really was just extended scenes. They weren't deleted scenes. Maybe like one or two were deleted scenes, but a lot of it was just extended scenes for No Way Home. Another thing, the ending of the movie is drawn out a bit. I'm not going to go into how and why, but when you watch the movie, at least I figured out what was going on, and by this point of the movie, you know where it's heading. And I think they dragged that out a bit, and they could have cut some time there. So that's like two major sequences. There's some bits with Miles and his parents. I think they hammer in a little too much what's going on there. I mean, we get it. He is lying to them. They know he's lying to them, and they just want to talk it out and trust each other and love each other. But Miles is scared of that conversation because of the consequences it may or may not bring. They could have cut out at least one of the interactions of that conversation, because the conversation happens a few times. They could have taken one of those out. But if my only problem with the movie is that it's a bit long, I'd say that's a win for a movie. What I just talked about as deleted scenes or extended scenes on a 4K, so you know where I stand with my rating. Before you get it on 4K though, you gotta go out and see it in theaters. 100% worth it. This movie is fantastic. Those are my thoughts on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and live your imagination.